Welcome back to another explainer. It's really easy to think of history as just a dusty collection of old dates, long forgotten battles, and faded names. But when we actually take a closer look, history is a living, breathing blueprint for modern character. Today, we're diving into the incredibly rich, multifaceted history of Banten. This is a region in Indonesia that hasn't just shaped local culture, but global narratives. And we're going to extract the core values of its most iconic figures to see exactly how they apply to us right now.
So you might be wondering, what can the past possibly teach today's digital generation? I mean, what can a 17th century sultan who fought off colonial powers, a 19th century globally recognized scholar, and the often silent women of Banten's past teach Gen Z? Well, the answer is absolutely everything. We're going to see how universities today are actively using these historical giants to build the character of modern students.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. Iconic figures. 2. Sultan and scholar. 3. The hidden role of women. 4. Guardians of dynasty. And 5. Reactualizing values. Let's get right into it.
All right, Part 1. Iconic figures of Banten's history. Traditionally, Banten's historiography has a pretty common bias. Much like global history, it's usually written as this grand epic of men. The protagonists dominating the historical stage are almost always male, leading the charge in politics, religion, economics, and warfare. These are the loud histories, right? The ones filled with diplomacy, clashes with colonial powers, and the forging of great dynasties. But to truly grasp a society's character, we do need to understand the virtues of these prominent figures first.
Which brings us to Part 2, the character of the Sultan and the scholar.
Let's look at the character of our first figure, Sultan Ageng Tirtayasa. He ruled Banten back in the 17th century. Researchers have actually distilled his leadership into the acronym TRIPS. T stands for tolerance. He actually opened Banten to global cooperation and even sent the very first Indonesian diplomatic mission all the way to London. R is for religious, as he based his policies on strong ethics. I is for innovative. He literally earned the title Tirtayasa because he engineered a massive, highly innovative agricultural irrigation system. P is for professionalism. He appointed his ministers based on merit, not just royal bloodlines. He even appointed an ethnic Chinese convert as his minister of economy. And finally, S stands for the spirit of struggle or patriotism. He fiercely opposed the Dutch East India Company's monopoly, fighting for his nation's sovereignty right up until his dying breath in prison.
Now, contrasting that leadership style is Sheikh Nawami al-Bantani, a real 19th century intellectual powerhouse. His character is defined by 3 distinct dimensions: the educator, the scientist or scholar, and the preacher. As an educator in Mecca, he was incredibly democratic. He warmly accepted ideas from his students and heavily emphasized critical thinking over just passive listening. As a scholar, the man was staggeringly productive. He wrote around 100 books. These were mostly detailed commentaries on classic texts that made really complex ideas accessible. And as a preacher, he sent his students back across the archipelago to spread that knowledge. He truly possessed this massive combination of intellectual intelligence and profound emotional intelligence.
Moving on to Part 3, the hidden role of Banten's women. We've talked about the famous men, but honestly, the history of Banten is fundamentally incomplete without its women. This is the silent history.
Think about the contrast here. On one side of history, you have the loud actions, the kings, the wars, the politics. But on the other side, forming the actual bedrock of the society, you have the women, the mothers, the artisans, and the key political advisors. Throughout Banten's history, their presence has often been ignored, lost in the shadow of male domination. But artifactual, textual, and oral traditions prove they were there all along. They provided the foundational stability that actually allowed those sultans and scholars to thrive in the first place.
Okay, Part 4. Guardians of Dynasty and Tradition. Let's just trace this timeline for a second, because it goes all the way back to prehistoric times. Archaeological digs at Banten Girang show that women were the primary terracotta artisans and weavers. They were literally the economic backbone of early settlements. Fast forward to the 16th century, and the very foundation of the Banten Islamic Sultanate rests on a woman named Kawang Anten. Through her marriage to Sheriff Hidayatullah, she provided the crucial maternal lineage that legitimized the entire new dynasty. Then, in the 17th century, when the kingdom faced a massive political crisis over an underage heir, it was a woman, Nyai Dewanagiri, who stepped up. She acted as the kingdom's supreme political guardian and regent to cool down social tensions and keep the empire from fracturing apart. And this maternal transmission of culture continued right into the colonial era. There's this incredibly powerful quote from a traditional poem taught by a mother to her son who was receiving a Dutch education in Batavia. Translated, it says, "Be obedient and love your parents. Remain faithful to serve the majesty. That is the true science as a basis for struggle." It just goes to show that even as Western influence grew, it was the women, the mothers, who secretly guarded the region's cultural values and resilience. They passed them down like spiritual armor to the next generation.
Which brings us to Part 5, Reactualizing Values for Today. So, Sultan Ageng Tirtayasa University, or UNTRTR, has brilliantly crystallized all these historical virtues into one institutional value system called Jawara. Now, in local culture, Jawara traditionally means a champion or hero, but here it's an acronym. Jujur for honest, Adil for fair, Wibawa for dignified, Amana for trustworthy, religious for religious, and accountable for accountable. This is not just some abstract list, it's a direct extraction of the character shown by Botton's historical icons, and it's designed to be the ultimate character education blueprint for today's students.
Now you might be thinking, do young people today actually care about centuries-old history? Well, the survey data is pretty clear. University students were asked if the character values of Sultan Ageng Tirtayasa and Sheikh Nawawi are needed for millennial learning, and an overwhelming 100% agreed. Specifically, 63.5% agreed, and 36.5% strongly agreed. Gen Z actively recognizes that these historical blueprints are highly relevant to navigating modern challenges.
Furthermore, when asked if these specific historical values should be reactualized to build that Jawara character in their education right now, the enthusiasm was identical. 61.3% agreed and 38.7% strongly agreed. They don't just want to read about history in a textbook, they want to embody it. They actively want the innovation of the Sultan and the emotional intelligence of the scholar deeply embedded in their daily academic lives.
And this isn't just academic theory either. It translates into real, tangible modern policy. By applying the innovative and patriotic traits of the past, protecting the land and managing resources just like the Sultan did with his irrigation systems, the university has launched the Smart and Green Campus Initiative. They're taking those historical values of environmental stewardship and applying them directly to modern sustainable energy, water conservation, and waste management. It's literally history in action, proving for sure that the ethics of the 17th century can completely drive the sustainability goals of the 21st.
So the absolutely crucial point to take away from this explainer is that history is not just behind us, it's the very foundation we stand upon today. Whether it's the loud, fearless innovation of a sultan, the brilliant, democratic intellect of a scholar, or the enduring foundational guardianship of the women who held the whole shebang together, these traits are timeless. So the question I leave you with is this. When you look at the icons of your own local history, how will you reactualize their legacy and embody those values in your life today? Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.